Hey everyone, Nubkeks here, and in today's video we're looking at, I think this is the 6th boss, and well into raid testing now at this point for the 9.1 raid, Sanctum of Domination. So Painsmith Raznal. This is an interesting boss which is based around environmental effects, and also, unfortunately right now, does have quite a few bugs and things that I think will be changed and fixed. So, well, let's take a look at the fight and see what's actually going on. So as you'll notice immediately, the ground is split up into this like checkerboard of different squares, and this is actually very, very important for the spike mechanics. Basically, you fight the boss 3 times throughout phase 1, and there's an intermission between each one. And for each of these 3 times that you fight him, he fights with a different weapon. The main effect that this has on the group is that the boss will periodically throw his weapon at the tank. The tank can then run it out and drop it wherever they want in the room, and then this wave of spikes will erupt from where the weapon hit in different patterns. So in phase 1, it will just be a sort of expanding square of spikes will come from wherever it was dropped. In phase 2, it will drop in a cross, and then in phase 3, I think it does both actually. And speaking of bugs, the first very fun bug that we found was that, well, right, so you get the idea that the boss throws the weapon at you, at the tank, and they choose where to drop it. Well, if it's a Vengeance Demon Hunter, they can just jump off the edge of the platform, because it is this platform hanging on chains above a pool of lava, and there's space on the sides. A Vengeance Demon Hunter could just jump off the edge, the weapon would fly off the edge and not do anything, and then he could just glide back onto the platform. So that was kind of, honestly, it's kind of hilarious. Though obviously that won't actually work, I assume, once this goes live. It's pretty cheesy. Tying in with this to make it more tricky, there's another few mechanics that are going on. So one is chains that will go on about 4 players. Will be targeted with these chains. They'll spin around those players, and simply it turns you into a bumper car, right? Anyone that you walk into is going to get knocked away. So this just makes it a bit more tricky to dodge those waves of spikes that are coming out. You know, if someone with chains runs into someone else, they can easily knock them into the spikes, which is bad. The boss will also throw out fire traps, which again will be targeted on on random players. He throws out about 4 or 5 of these. And the thing that happens with these is that whenever you trigger one, it will do a bunch of raid damage and put a dot on the raid, which lasts for 3 seconds. Now that stacks, so the idea is that you want to space out the trap explosions 3 seconds apart. It gets kind of hard because basically, if these get touched by other mechanics, such as the wave of spikes or the rolling balls of death, which we'll come to in a second, whenever those mechanics touch these traps, the traps go off, and yeah, they just instantly apply the dot. So it's actually tricky. It's quite tricky to try to space these out properly. I assume actually having a really clear plan in terms of where you're going to drop the tank weapon, and therefore where the wave of spikes is coming from, will make sense. And then, I don't know, I was kind of looking at the checkerboard on the floor and thinking, man, if you were able to bait the traps like 2 squares apart, maybe that would just work out in terms of timing and how long it takes the spikes to move, that it would trigger and that sort of thing. But it's quite hard, you know, the traps he throws out, they come out pretty quickly. It's hard to actually be stacked up because there are people with the chains spinning around, bumper carring everyone. It's harder than it looks, I guess I would say. It's maybe it actually looks pretty hard, I don't know, but yeah, this one's definitely tricky. The spiky balls of death then are the other main mechanic here of P1, and this was our next set of bugs. So basically, a line of these spiky balls will just roll across the whole platform, and these will kill you if they touch you. And we weren't sure how this was working. Sometimes there would be a gap on the end, like 3 of the balls on the end would despawn, which was kind of weird and seemed kind of unintended, but there would be a gap, so you just run around in the free space, which to me seems pretty appropriate for heroic. Sometimes there was no gap, so we had to choose one of the balls and nuke it down on time. They had a lot of health though, so it wasn't clear if that was actually intended. Again, I would assume that would be something you do on Mythic. That's a very, very standard sort of Mythic mechanic. A little bit tough for Heroic, but I'm not sure what the intended idea there is. And then sometimes even there'd just be gaps, like the balls would roll at slightly different speeds. So sometimes there would be a gap and you could just squeeze through at the end, no problem. But then sometimes there was absolutely no gap. So yeah, it's kind of inconsistent. And honestly, I think at this point, we're probably not sure exactly how it's supposed to work. Apparently, from one of my guilties who's watching Limit stream of this, said that Limit just started using Warlock portals out into the chains, holding the platform up and cheesing it with that and doing all sorts of crazy things. So yeah, seems a bit busted, but We'll see. We'll see. Phase 2 then is very, very hectic. Basically, there'll just be these waves of lines of spikes going across the floor with one safe spot every single time. And these come through very quickly. They're very, very fast. So you kind of need to be running constantly to get to that safe spot and not get squashed. You can dodge the spikes. You can dodge, excuse me, I just dropped something. You can dodge the spikes by just stepping over them as they go off, but this was quite punishing. The timing was very, very tight. You know, I didn't have the best MS, you know, because this is the PTR, it's not my normal server. So yeah, it was a little bit tricky. You know, there were a few times where I tried to walk over it and then I got, you know, hit by the wave of spikes, even if it was like 3 foot past me or something like that. It was a little bit punishing. So it does seem like the intended thing to do is that you do go to that safe spot. At the same time, during this, there are these waves of swirlies coming out, targeting random players and just bombarding the raid. These create a bunch of ads. These ads don't really do anything. They're just sort of there. So just AoE the ads down while you are moving around. So in terms of this fight then, what do I think? What specs look good? So obviously, you know, honestly, I usually talk about damage profiles and stuff on this fight, but honestly, right now, the main thing that affects how good a spec is on this fight really is the ability to teleport around, right? Right now, avoiding the spiky balls is by far the hardest part of the fight. So yeah, you know, warlocks that can put down a demonic circle and just teleport to that circle and avoid it. Any spec that can play Venthyr or Night Fae and use Soul Shape or Door of Shadows can avoid that. Mages can blink over. Demon Hunters can just glide outside around the edge of the platform. All that sort of stuff seems really strong. Obviously, Vengeance Demon Hunter tanks that can drop the weapons off the side seem ridiculous. I assume that monks could do the same thing with Transcendence. Warriors could possibly do it with Heroic Leap, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's mostly about the cheese, honestly, at this point, guys. Other than that, it is, you know, it's a single target pushing boss. There's a bunch of AoE in the intermission, but certainly on Heroic, the AoE is not too major. It's more of a padding thing. So you're mostly looking for, you know, for decent single target damage, basically. My thoughts on whether the fight is fun. I think that this fight needs a little bit more development work. I would say it did seem to have a few little bugs and very obvious and weird exploits. But that being said, I think this fight is going to be really, really cool. Again, I love these environmental fights. I absolutely love them. Blackrock Foundry is probably my favorite raid of all time. You know, Hans and Franz, Operator Thogar, these environmental things going on in the room, I think are just super cool. And this fight definitely captures that. I mean, it's even, you know, you're fighting over a giant pit of lava. It literally is Blackrock Foundry, right? So yeah, I think it definitely captures that idea. So it's pretty nifty. I think it's cool. I think this fight will be fun. Lots of movement, just dodging all the spikes. Yeah, it's very visceral. So yeah, there you go, guys. That is Painsmith Raznal. We'll see how this guy does. But this is definitely a fight to watch. It's just a really fun, solid fight with lots of spikes. Spikes, many spikes. Watch out. And with that, we actually only have 2 bosses left to see on Heroic. The next one is the 9, which is coming up tomorrow, and it's really good, actually. Really great fight. And then the final one is Sylvanas Windrunner, which I think is probably going to be the last thing that we test. We're actually going to be going into Mythic testing this week as well on the first 2 bosses, the Taragru and the Eye of the Jailer. So stay tuned for those. They'll be up over the weekend too. My thoughts on the Mythic versions of those fights, and also seeing whatever changes Blizzard has implemented since we first saw them. So guys, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time very soon for even more PTR coverage here for 9.1. See y'all then. Bye bye.